everyone. Welcome to Uptown Studios Live. I'm Tina Reynolds, and I have such an interesting guest. Virginia Hedrick she's going to fill me with more knowledge, deeper knowledge about Native people. The work that she does is amazing. She's heavy into her leadership career at such a young age. For me, it's a young age. And Virginia, you have, well, let's tell people where you work now. And then I want a little bit of history about how you were raised, because I think you have some stories to tell.
Yes. Squenikoi, good morning. Naknow, Virginia Hedrick, Shregon Mewamechuk, Nekpulik Law. Good morning. My name is Virginia Hedrick. I'm a member of the Yurok Tribe, and I come from the village of Shregon. That's the introduction I just gave you. And I am the executive director of the California Consortium for Urban Indian Health. Thank you so much, Tina, for the introduction. So our work at Sakui, we do policy advocacy and statewide public health programming on behalf of 10 urban Indian organizations. Do you want me to start about sort of my background?
Yeah, let's go back, because you told me that you were raised on a reservation, and it's just, I think that people generally that are watching this or getting information don't have that depth. It's like your culture is uniquely wonderful and rich, and there's so much that I don't know. So start with being raised on a reservation. I've visited a couple of reservations in my past, and it's just an interesting life. It's just so different. So talk about where you were born and how you started.
Yeah, happy to give a little visual. So I was born and raised on the Yurok Reservation in Northern California in Humboldt County on the Klamath River. The Yurok Reservation is 44 miles along the Klamath River, 1 mile on both sides. I grew up sort of at the middle of the reservation, near my ancestral village, the area where I would say my people have been since time began. And that area specifically, I grew up without electricity, without phones, without internet, without cable TV or satellite TV. Actually, just in the last 5 years, the childhood home I grew up in, my parents got electricity. And
wow.
So they have electricity now. It goes out really often, just based on their rural nature. So I went to school in a 3-classroom elementary school, kindergarten through 8th grade, always under 35 students, with either 2 or 3 teachers on a regular basis. Multi-grade classrooms, 4th through 8th grade classrooms. I would happen to be in the same classroom with my 8th grade brother in the 4th grade. I'm the youngest of 10 children.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I know. And then the high school I went to is actually on the Hoopa Reservation, a neighboring reservation. Took 2 bus rides and about an hour and 45-minute bus ride school bus commute to high school, on the only publicly funded high school on a reservation in California. And that school is just about under 250 students.
Man.
That's a little bit about.
All right, so tell me about living on a reservation. When was the first time that you went to a city? Do you remember?
So the biggest city for us was Eureka, and it was about 2 hours away, or it is about 2 hours away. I also spent a couple of years, about 5-6 years, living just outside of Portland in Oregon City from the time that I was like 3 to 8. So I had some exposure there to city life. Mm-hmm. But we would go to Eureka for everything. So Eureka is where the large grocery stores are, where the laundromats are. And so really 2-hour commute to do meet basic needs like groceries and laundry was pretty routine.
Wow, that's groceries and laundry for 10 kids.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how's your mom?
We grew up, just a little bit about our lifestyle. We grew up really reliant on a subsistence lifestyle. So we did a lot of fishing right out of the Klamath River. Yurok people retain our ancestral right to gill net fish on our river. And we fish in our family hole that has been ours also since the beginning of time. And so we grew up eating a lot of fish, eating a lot of deer meat, a lot of eel, a lot of sturgeon. And then we also, our homes were the recipient of government sponsored food commodity systems. And so we also would receive food commodities, large boxes with canned goods and dried pastas.
Velveeta cheese, right?
And the blocks of cheese. Absolutely. We didn't have a fridge. So almost everything was shelf stable. And, my dad built I am young, but I have these really old school experiences where we had
You're old. Getting raised that way, it gives you wisdom.
Yeah.
And then you have all of the people around you that are wise and sharing wisdom. So
yes.
Earthly wisdom is your birthright, especially when you're raised that way.
Yeah, so fortunate. I grew up right. My neighbor was my grandmother, Yurok, who passed a number of years ago. And she was born speaking the Yurok language. She was one of the last elders to be born speaking Yurok first until you learn English at a later time in life. And that was my neighbor growing up. So she taught us language, was really critical in ceremonial revitalizations. I'm also come from a generation where I've had ceremony my whole life. There was a period of time where it was illegal for Indigenous people in the United States to practice our religion. God. I always am transparent about that's part of my experience, is that it was normalized. But the generation just before me were really fighting for those rights, to reinstate our right to ceremony.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just a crazy story. So you graduate from high school and then the world hits you smack dab in the face, right? Where did you go to college? Tell me that transition.
So I, at a freshman year in high school, had a guidance counselor talk about college, and he laid out this plan about, I said, well, what do you have to do to get to go anywhere you want to go? He said, well, just get straight A's, play all the sports, do all the things, and you can go anywhere you want to go. And I was like, okay, I'll try. And so I did. But I chose school. I wanted to be as far away from home as possible, like any good 18-year-old, right? So
it's just, that's not a reservation thing. That's any kid, right?
I know. So I chose, my decisions were, I didn't even apply to any Bay Area, Northern California schools. I didn't apply to UC Berkeley. It was too close. So I ended up choosing UCLA. So I moved from the reservation to Los Angeles.
Oh my God, that had to be just such a culture shock.
You know what? It was demobilizing for a minute. I didn't know what I would expect. I realize now, like, how naive and how what a scary thing I was doing. In the moment, you know everything, right? In the moment, you are the keeper of all the world's knowledge at 18. And so I moved to Los Angeles, and it was really tough. It was really tough.
Oh,
I distinctly remember one time as a child, my dad, who was on tribal council for about 17 years, he had a lawyer come up from Los Angeles to our house. And he asked if he could sleep outside on a picnic table. And so I asked my dad, I was like 10 years old. I'm like, what is wrong with him? Does he not like our house? And he said, oh, he just wants to see the stars. Where he lives, you can't see the stars. And I thought my dad was joking. Like, I really was like, Dad, that's crazy. There's nowhere you can't see the stars. And he's like, no, babe, no. I'm telling you, there are places in the world where you can't see the stars. And so he's not being rude. He brought a sleeping bag, and he really wants to sleep under the stars. So it's okay. Don't bug him. Just, and so where also the reservation is open range. I'm like, what about the cows? Like, what if cows come in the yard? He's like, he'll be fine. Don't worry about this man. And my first night in Los Angeles, my gut like had a knot, and I was like, the stars are gone. This is the place. I've reached the end of the earth where there are no stars. And I had not like deeply considered like these things that I didn't realize were such fundamental needs, right? Like seeing the stars, and you just take those things for granted.
So tell me, your first year in college, and you're thrown into a society and culture that's so different than yours. Did you want to mainstream and fit in with the masses, or did you grasp onto your heritage?
So I'm fortunate at UCLA. There was a really small, about 20 American Indian students on campus who run a student organization, and they knew me. They knew I was coming. I was actually freaked out. Like, do I smell like the res? Like, how do you know who I am? Because they knew I was a mile away. I didn't know that they had like my picture and profile, and they were like looking for me, was like, God, is it that obvious?
Oh my God.
But they really wrapped me in. There was one other student on campus the entire time that I was there. There was one other student who also came from a reservation, and he was in graduate school. He was from the Navajo reservation, and I remember he just gave me a big hug, and he said, "You're my little sister now. Like, I'm gonna help you." And I'd never met him before, and I thought, and at the time I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I'm from the reservation too. Like, I'm here. Like, we're gonna get through this. You're gonna get through this. Stay with it."
So at that point, did you know how hard it was going to be, or were they just kind of going, "Oh, you're gonna have some root awareness"?
Yeah, I don't think that anyone at the time ever really understood. In the spring, I took them to my home, and I think that was the moment that my friend group really understood the ends of the earth, like how far I was from home.
Yeah.
About 3 years in, my grandmother became very sick, and I had been home working for the tribe. I spent every summer and every break working for our repatriation program. And my grandmother became really sick, and my boss at the time, who she's incredible. She said, "You don't have to go back to school right now." And I said, "But I do. Like, I'm coming up on my last year and a half." And she said, "You're only going to get this time with your grandmother one time."
Yeah.
And so I stayed a semester at home, and I was able to spend some really critical time with my grandmother. And then my grandmother said, "If you stay here with me for these months, you have to promise that I see you graduate." And so then I had to really bust ass.
Yeah, I bet.
22 units a semester, and do summer and winter schools, because it was near the end. I knew she only had a few years left. And so we made it to that time. We made it to that time. She was able to.
So how old was your grandmother?
She was 92 when she passed.
Oh my gosh. And she lived the whole time on the reservation.
Yeah.
What's the life?
She was removed to boarding school. She went to boarding school in Riverside, California, German Indian boarding school. She was a riveter in San Diego during World War II.
Wow.
Where she met my dad's dad. And then she made her way home. She actually sent my dad to her parents, to his grandparents, for the first 6 years of his life, while she could make some money and come home with some wages. So yeah, there was about a 10-15 year period where she lived off reservation. And then she moved back home. And to put things in context, her grandparents remember time of contact. Her grandmother remembers seeing the first non-Indian people come to California, come to our lands. And so I always like to contextualize that for people.
Yeah.
Here you see me, this young person. So my grandmother's grandmother remembers time of contact here in California. We're not talking like 500 or 600 years ago. We're talking about really short histories.
That's a pretty short history. So what do you miss most about home?
In this time of COVID, I'm so homesick. I don't even want you to ask me that, Tina, because I haven't been able to go home. And I usually go home like every 4 to 6 weeks. I miss the river. I miss hearing the frogs. I miss the stars, and I miss my family. I'm one of just 2 of us that live outside of the ancestral territory. Nearly everyone lives somewhere around home and in the ancestral territory.
Yeah. So how many nieces and nephews do you have?
I think our last count was like 27, maybe. And then that's not talking like, I'm a great aunt.
Oh yeah.
Like I have a niece and nephew here in the Sacramento area that are 12 and 13.
Oh man. So is it a strong family bond to stay with the culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all remain really connected, and people should know this about, American Indian communities, our connection to the land. And so much of what we do is land-based. Our ceremonies have to happen in one specific spot. We can't just build a new church. We have to go to this one place. And so, yeah, we have those connections. My brother's the vice chair of our tribe. My sister has worked for tribal government for almost 20 years. So yeah, I think we just have really local ties. And, having moved to Los Angeles, my exposure to experience of the Indigenous people in California grew infinitely. If you think about the Indigenous people of Los Angeles, they're often so invisible, but yet they're there, they're thriving. There's a community of Tongva people there, same with the San Francisco Bay. And so, my transition from sort of rural tribal advocacy to urban advocacy was pretty natural in terms of, I'm an urban Indian now. I'm raising 5 kids off the reservation here in Sacramento, all in city schools. And so that's part of, this complex, unique identity I hold, is both being from a reservation and being from this very rural area, to my lived experience here,
Sure.
being an urban Indian person and raising urban Indian kids.
Well, and you bring it every day to the work that you do and the people that you connect with. So someday when COVID is lifted, I would love for you to invite me to one of your ceremonies that you can invite people to.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It is, it's the part of my personal growth that says you don't really know a person until you can be friends with them. It's like, being gay. It's like all of my friends learn more about my culture and house music and dancing by being friends with me. And that was one of the greatest gifts that my friend Britta Guerrero, who you all also know, we could share our cultures, and we just bonded. She's just fabulous.
Yes, I agree.
So the second half of this, we've got 15 minutes left. First, I would like if Bex behind the scenes has your website for the Consortium for Urban Indian Health. If we have that website, we can throw the ticker up. But I want to talk about not just COVID. COVID is the siren that's sounding about health issues with Native people in California and throughout the nation, but we'll just talk about California. That's just the siren that says there's all this stuff that's bad. There's all this shit that's happening and has been happening to your people. Let's start with COVID, and then we'll work down how racism has definitely one of the public health issues.
Yeah, and thank you, Tina, for situating it that way, because that's absolutely how I see it as well. So when we take a step back and look at COVID-19 and its impacts to Indian country, in December, the CDC released a report that showed that American Indian and Alaska Natives were 3.5 times more likely to contract COVID-19, nearly twice as likely to die from COVID-19, and 4 to 5 times more likely to be hospitalized. Of specific interest is what happens when you start breaking down the age groups. For young American Indians, ages 20 to 29, were 10.5 times more likely to die from COVID than white counterparts. It's devastating, right? So when we see this zeroing in on specific age groups, it assumes this whole notion that we're all in this together, when we're simply not all in this together.
Yeah, right.
We're all experiencing this pandemic very differently. What we not just have access to in the moment, but what we have historically had access to in the last 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 years has culminated to this moment now of how we experience this differently. And so, you're right. Like, what is this siren? What is this siren on poverty? That American Indian people throughout the nation report some of the highest rates of poverty, some of the highest rates of unemployment, some of the highest rates of substance use disorder, domestic violence, right?
Yep.
And so then you put it in this pandemic and you say, okay, everyone shelter in place, and some of our lowest paid jobs, those businesses are closed. So now you don't have access to work. And you start to look at not just American Indian communities, but that's what we're talking about today, how this becomes this beacon for this disaster, right?
Yes.
And I always implore people to think about this, that like what we do moving forward, what we do now in this moment will be what will be written in the history books 100 years from now. So who are we in this moment, and what do we do moving forward? Indigenous peoples throughout the United States have been working on a land back effort since time of contact. Like, how do we get this land back that was stolen? And you see some successes. And I want people to think about the connection between some of the things I shared earlier in my experiences growing up, connection to land and health and wellness and access to food and COVID, right? Like this is a recipe. It was a recipe for disaster, but we can also use these same key ingredients for healing, for healing moving forward, for growth. And it's not too late, right? Like, it's not too late. We shouldn't just be saying, oh, this is really terrible. It's like, this is terrible and we can do something.
This is terrible. We have to do something. It's not just watching the news and going, oh my, that's just so terrible. There are things that each of us can do. Your whole job is surrounded by doing things. There are things that I can do. It's like I reached out earlier to you to say, let me help you with some of your marketing and your website. It's like, and I mean it. I want to help you. It is, how do we reach the others that need to support what you're doing? It's like, I'm one of the others and I need to help support you so that your struggle is less.
Yeah. And, the Urban Indian Health Institute, based out of Seattle, which does national tribal epidemiology for urban Indian health organizations across the nation, just released a report on data genocide. And essentially, it's the systemic and systematic erasure of American Indian, Alaska Native people throughout data systems throughout the nation. And they released a report card state by state, specific to COVID. And the state of California received a C, which is actually better than I thought we would fare. And some of the reasons that you see this is, as American Indian people, many of us are multiracial. My mother is white. And so if I list both American Indian and white on a demographics card, I won't be attributed to the American Indian group, despite who I am, despite my membership in a federally recognized tribe. I will be listed as multi-race and therefore discounted as an American Indian person. And this has all historical notions, right? American Indian people are the only people in the United States that the federal government has assigned blood quantum to and tracks our blood quantum in the same way that we've tracked the breed and blood quantum of dogs and cattle. And then you can add American Indians to the list. We're tracked in the same way. And so
is it in that blood tracking, is it if you don't meet a certain standard that
then you're not considered American Indian by the federal government?
Not considered. So, and I heard in the past, just randomly, it's like 1/16 Native American you can count, but less than that you don't.
It really depends tribal nation to tribal nation. So under tribal sovereignty, tribes have the right to govern their own tribal enrollment, and every tribe is different. The boilerplate template that was given by the Bureau of Indian Affairs to tribes indicates 1/4. And over time, tribes have adjusted that. And so each tribe has a different blood quantum system. Some tribes actually, they're few in number, but there are a few that have a descendancy. As long as you can prove you're a descendant of their tribe, then you're eligible for enrollment. Other tribes are that 1/4 mark, 1/8, 1/16. Sometimes it's just of that one tribe. Sometimes it's that tribe and any other tribal makeup. And California actually has a unique history of the federal government terminating tribal status of more than 70 tribes in the state of California. So saying these tribes, you're no longer federally recognized tribes. Here's a small amount of money. We're severing our relationship with you, as though you could do that. Like they thought this was solely a political relationship. In the 1980s,
have fought.
I would actually say it's a result of the opposite, of California not being progressive. And so from an indigenous perspective, I wouldn't say that California is progressive. We had indentured servitude here of American Indian people, which resulted in major land loss, identity loss, language loss. But yeah, do I think there were really incredible lawyers that came out of the UC Berkeley era School of Law to help support those tribes and that class action suit? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, well, we've got some progressives fighting the.
That's right.
There's always going to be a fight. There's always going to be a fight to do the right thing. For people, the underdogs. Any underdog has to fight a big fight.
But you're right. There are strokes of solidarity, right? There are shared struggles across communities, and how we lean on allies, how we become better allies too, right? Like how we support other movements is important to moving the whole health of California forward. It should never be, and I think that's a cultural lens too. It should never be about self, and that's some of our messaging about Sequoia is protecting community, because those are values we hold. It's not necessarily about self-preservation, about how I stay safe from COVID, but it's about how I protect my community and family.
Sure. Yeah. We have 5 minutes left. What's the burning situation that you're fighting on a day-to-day basis? What's that?
Increase access to vaccines. We know that vaccines will have life-saving capabilities. Of recent, we have lost some monumental California Indian elders and leaders throughout California. And when we lose an elder in Indian country, it's like a whole library is gone. It's like knowledge we'll never get back. And so it's tremendous. It's tremendous loss. It's tremendous triggering of historical trauma with these kinds of losses. And so really the key here is everyone doing their part, following public health guidance, getting the vaccine when and if it's available to you, continued advocacy to get vaccine equity out there. We knew from the front when we prioritized healthcare workers that was not a racial lens. And I think we all supported that. I support that perspective.
Yes.
But now it's time we start moving into the next phase, right?
Well, and the next phase is like, let's move the people, Native people up higher. It's like, I know that there are several, like the Sacramento Native American Health Center is out there, but how is it getting to the reservations?
So nearly every urban and tribal facility in the state of California is getting their allocation from the Indian Health Service. And the Indian Health Service has really stepped to the plate throughout this pandemic to deliver to the Indian healthcare delivery system in California. So
is there a fight? Are there people that we—
There had been, yes. Early on throughout the last year, many of us in policy advocacy were making this ask of the federal government to have an Indian country set aside through the Indian Health Service. The Indian healthcare delivery system in California meets about 90,000 American Indian people. There are more than 700,000 throughout the state. So it's not enough. It does get a critical mass there. 90% of American Indians in California live in our urban setting. And so we have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing for areas like Oakland, Sacramento, San Francisco, to get into those deep pocket areas.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to help. You let me know how I can help and what marketing things I can help with. And I'm there. I'm there to help you. And my dog is there too.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to be on with you today and cover so much. I really am honored to have joined your show and to connect with you.
Well, I really feel like this is a start. The work that you do and the people that you have to interface with, and what is it? It's probably 90% of your day is educating people, and 10% is moving the agenda forward. Right?
That's right. Well, in COVID, we're all giving like 150%.
Right.
Like I'm giving more than I really have to give, but I'm pulling from other pots.
So have you gotten your shots yet?
I have. So I received my second dose on a standby list at the Sacramento Native American Health Center, and I am 3 days out. Felt pretty run down the first day. I'm great. You know what? I woke up Monday with just the regular Monday, I can't believe it's Monday feeling, but no other symptoms. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome. I go for my second shot on March 6th. So I'm ready, and then a couple weeks later, then I'll say, hey, you want to meet for a drink?
Exactly. I know, right? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, my bubble gets to like expand and break.
A little bit.
Yes.
We'll go for it. If there is there a place on your website for people to get more information, or just go to the website?
Just go to the website. You'll find a lot of information in the About Us. We have a COVID-specific page and census as well, impacts of the most recent census, domestic violence. There's a lot of program support there.
Okay. I worked on the census for Sacramento. I was on their marketing. We did all their marketing.
Right. Yeah, right.
So I have seen your name around, and it's like, oh man, I need to meet this woman. She's a kick-ass badass. You're doing the good work.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to connect after this. Everybody, I want you to share with your friends and have them watch this episode. Get involved. If you don't know any Native people, it is as simple as going to her website and reaching out and finding a committee that you can join, or finding some people that you can connect with your knowledge base, with theirs, and how we can expand this whole effort to raise people up. And
that's right.
We need to help raise people up. Everybody needs to. Thank you so much, Virginia. I really enjoyed this. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.